back, everyone, to another episode of Leaders Podcast. Leaders Podcast gives me the opportunity to speak to well-renowned industry leaders from around the world who share their insights, their journey, their passion in the intelligence and investigation industry worldwide. Today, I am honored to be joined by a friend, a colleague, a professional from Panama, Mr. Brett Mikkelson. Welcome, Brett. It's an honor to have you on today's show, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Oh, I tell you what, I'm having a good time already. For those who have done these before, you know that there's always about 5 minutes prior to actually starting the recording that you get to BS a little bit with a friend who doesn't even know where he's at in the world. And so my name is Brett Mikkelson. Everybody gets the Mickelson wrong, so and I let everybody do that on purpose because to me it's hilarious. I'm based out of the Republic of Panama. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I've been in the industry now for a little over 30 years, and I started off as a U.S. Army interrogator down here, and then realized I was in a tropical paradise. And most people wait until retirement to look for a tropical paradise to retire to. I said, I'm already here. I'm just staying, So we do work all throughout Latin America, and I've definitely done a lot of work with Mike before. So
brilliant, thanks, Brett. Why Latin America? Why Panama? Other than it's probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, but why did you relocate out of Wisconsin to Panama? What was the thought process behind that?
Well, there really wasn't much of a thought process. I was in the military, and they said, "Here are orders. You are going to Panama." I mean, that was really the extent of it. Panama invasion happened in December 1989, and before that, I had orders to come down already. I had no idea why. It was a long story, a funny story behind that, but the bottom line is, I got here in May of 1990, and part of my job was really to, as an interrogator, it wasn't really so much interrogating, but it was using our human intelligence capabilities and training to fulfill a few tasks. There were a few people, high-level military, that were still in hiding. We had to find them. There were a cache of weapons that were missing, and we knew they were missing because the U.S. always supplied countries like Panama with all of their weapons. So when they did a physical count, they realized there were a few thousand missing. And that was bad news. So they needed us to go in and find that. So we ran sources, worked out of safe houses, and had a great time for that first year down here.
Wow. So that was when was that, Brett? What, in the early 90s or?
That was 1990. Yep. Came down in May of 1990. And I think that first task ended somewhere around the beginning of 1991. And from that point, we started, I would say, touring the region. I had two countries of study, which were Guatemala and Ecuador, and we would go into these countries, and there were different things that we needed to do. One of the things that I did was in the southern portion of Ecuador, there's a province called Zamora, and it borders with Peru, and there was always a conflict with Ecuador and Peru. So we were always hanging out in the area, and interestingly enough, we picked up my team and I picked up on a disease, a weird disease that started coming out of this region, and we started reporting on it. And the U.S. at the time, they were really hot on trying to stop, anything bad that was going on with our allies, and Ecuador was definitely an ally. They sent down a team and found out it was some ultra mega contagious something that was coming out of this mining industry, cold water, people wading into cold water, getting pulmonary disease and
Oh, wow.
highly contagious. So they were able to put that they were able to squash that quickly. And so those are little minor claim to fame, I saved the world type of a scenario back in the day.
And then what, you went into private sector work straight after that? I mean, what was that transition? Was there a market in Panama for that type of work back then?
It was, I guess, feast or famine at the time. It was, once again, we got a very little amount of time, so I'm going to do the long story short again. My original plan was in 1994, my father wanted me to get back into business with him up in Wisconsin. And he's a machinist. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. We'll do it. With only months of me to leave the service, he kind of changed the concept. He says, I'll be able to pay you minimum wage and you'll be working part-time. I was like, I've got a wife and a kid. I can't do that, And so I started looking at my other options, and I realized that, I'm going to just stay here in Panama and figure things out. I actually started an import-export business, and that was going okay. And coincidentally, it was bringing leather products from Ecuador and bringing them into Panama and selling them here. And I mean, it was great. It was putting food on the table, filled my house full of furniture, but I hated sales. I hated it. There was a lawyer friend of mine that he was doing my residency paperwork to work and live in Panama legally as a civilian. And I went into his office, and he tells me, he goes, man, I need this document. He shows me this document. It's a copy of a document. He says, I need this document. And they say that it doesn't exist. He says, but I have a copy of it, and they're trying to tell me that it's a fake, but I know it's not a fake. But he needed a legitimate certified copy of the original. And I looked at the document, and just before leaving the service, like I said, we were doing human intelligence work, and I was running sources throughout Panama like crazy. And I looked at the document, and I said, I can get that for you, And then he asked me the magic question. He goes, how much is it going to cost, right? And I don't remember what it was, but I needed $300 for something. And I said, $300, and he says, I'll do it. He says, but it does me no good tomorrow. I need it today. I think I walked 3 blocks from his office and went to the office that I needed to. And the girl's name was Tilcia. She's since passed away, sadly enough. And I said, Tilcia, I said, what do you think you can do to help me get this document, right? She looked at it, and she goes, I was told to hide that file.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh, like when? She goes, well, a couple of weeks ago. And I said, well, the certification is good for 90 days. Can you backdate this for like 30 days? And that way you're good, he's good, everybody's good. And she's like, yeah, absolutely. So she did that for me, and I went back and I gave him the document. He started passing my name around like a good plate of flapjacks. You know what I mean? He was just so happy. and that's how I kind of started getting into the industry. But I didn't even really know what I was doing. I was just helping lawyers with info that they needed. I felt I was more like a legal assistant in a certain way until I got a larger case, and the lawyer asked me, he goes, how long have you been a private investigator for? And it came out of my soul. I said, oh, that's what I've been doing. And that's really how it shook out,
So that's how you fell into the industry, right? From utilizing the skill sets that and adapting them to your local environment.
The universe was knocking on my door. I had no idea. I was forcing myself into doing something that I didn't necessarily like, but I was just trying to figure out a way to put food on the table, type of a thing. And that came in. And then I got that door knock again in the name of Buddy Bombette. I don't know if you know who Buddy was. Buddy was a prominent, well-known private investigator. He's out of Louisiana. He's also since passed away, sadly enough. Buddy was doing these international PI conferences out of Vegas and whatnot. He was very, very well-known in the industry. He was married to a Panamanian, so he had come to Panama, and he goes, Brett, he goes, because we started doing work together. He goes, Brett, you're doing a great job. He goes, you should go international. I was like, I wouldn't even know how to begin to go international. What does that mean? And he says, you need to join Global Investigators Network, which is also defunct, by the way. I don't know if you've ever heard of even Global Investigators Network.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah. So I started with Global Investigators Network. We did a conference up in Chicago, and then I heard about WAD, Intelinet, Council of International Investigators, all of these, and I thought, oh wow, this world is so nice, but it's so expensive. I gotta make more money to be able to be a part of the association, so I can make more money.
And when was that then? When did you start joining and networking with the association?
I would bet that was about must have been about 4 years after I had started. So from 94 to 98 maybe, which is about the same time I started looking at other things like doing polygraphs and just trying to figure out the industry. It's so vast, and it's really good to find a niche if you can. It's my niche. I didn't even realize what it was at the time. I was just doing stuff, and then I realized my niche was Panama, And then my niche was Latin America, and it is a complicated industry. Then when you get into a place where just the laws are complicated and the corruption just, it's overwhelming sometimes. But it's if you can mitigate through it all, then you've created a niche for yourself.
Yeah, completely. So your involvement in the associations, how did that shape your career? Because you're in Panama. I wouldn't say isolated because it's a hub, right?
Yeah.
It's a business hub there as well. But how did those decisions that you made back then shape your career to what it is today?
If you start off in something like I did and you don't really have much of a background, you kind of revert back to old TV shows like Matlock or Magnum PI or whatever, and you kind of go, well, okay, I can do that, and you see how they're kicking in doors and they're taking names, and they're always they're guns a blazing and type, and you know that's not the right thing to do, because if you've been raised well enough, you go, I can't do those things, right? It's probably illegal. But I think the advantage also, once you get into an association, you start seeing other professionals, and it's kind of like idolizing somebody that's good in the movies, somebody that's either matches your spiritualism or matches your aura in general. And you start saying, that's a great guy. I like this guy. I want to be like that guy, and it really does help on that level, on an ethics level. But then you start looking at, well, some of other people will look at maybe at a different angle. They'll look at contacts, resources, and whatnot. And to me, I kind of needed like a father figure, because in 1994, when I started, I was 23 years old. Okay. And so I'm getting into this industry, lots of energy, lots of motivation, thinking I can take on the world. I'm definitely invincible, right? At that age, nothing can kill you. Okay. So I was doing cases that most people would go, what the heck is wrong with you? Why did you just throw yourself out into the jungle and, trek for 14K through the brush to get to a mine to do, and it's like, well, that's what I was trained to do, so I can do it. It's the way it is.
Yeah.
But then you start seeing how everybody else really operates in the world, and so I think the association sector is really important to get somebody to gain better perspective about what the industry should really be about.
Yeah. No, agreed. And then you stepped up and you ran for president, right? For CII.
Like from one thing to the next. No, so it took about 20 years. But, the interesting thing is, like with Global Investigators Network, it was such a small association that I was immediately brought into the board. I mean, I think within a year I was brought into the board, and I remember there were several people that were introducing themselves, and they come off with this resume of experiences and education and what they've done, and they get to me, and I've always been somewhat of a jokester. I try to be, anyways. I think I'm hilarious, and it gets to me, and I said, "Hi, I'm Brett Mikkelson. I was born probably yesterday in comparison, and so and that's really how that was, but when you get onto something like this, I learned that silence is one of the most important qualities you could ever have, and silence and listening, and just start taking it in. I started taking pieces of, what Robert's Rules is, and what the process of actually having a board and bringing people together, and the respect that there is of giving somebody the opportunity to present themselves or present their committee reports or whatever the case may be, and understand that side of the association. So it kind of started there, and then I did the same thing with CII, the Council of International Investigators, where I got in on the boards, and I wanted to see what that was about. And I got to be a part of the committees. And one day I said, I'd like to do a little bit more. And I don't remember all of the positions I'd held prior to that, but we were going to do a conference in Panama, which we did. And I said, this is the perfect time for me to market myself to become president. Gosh darn it all to heck, you know, and that's kind of how that shaked out. That was 2018, I think it was 2017, 2018 was the year that I became president.
And what did you get out of that, Brett? Because it's, you know, you're devoting your time, right? You're devoting your time. You're trying to run a business, and you and I both know that associations can take lots and lots of time up. So, what? I know you're in your hometown and you marketed yourself, which is a great idea. But what did you get out of it?
There is definitely a lot to be said about getting yourself into something you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, and like the minute I became president, we have a board meeting, and I went, I'm not prepared for a board meeting. I kind of know what I want to do, and so Steve Kirby was my heaven sent. I mean, he came up to me and he goes, here's the minutes for here's the schedule for the upcoming board meeting, Mr. President. And I looked at him, I was like, you're the man, you know. Great. And so we sat down, and I was actually late for my first meeting because I was also running the conference. Okay, so I got there about 5 minutes late. But we get in there and we get started, and we got the ball rolling. And I remember that one of the main things I wanted to do at the time was I wanted to get the regional directors actually directing in the region, and that was something that they're mostly appointed, and they're there by name only, and there wasn't really a lot of activity. So that was one of the things I wanted to do as a new president. But yeah, it's that, and you know, less revenue for the company. That was definitely a shock. My wife is, or at the time, anyways, she was in charge of let's see, what do you call it? Finances and accounting and whatnot. And she comes up and she's like, I don't think we can do this for another year there, sweetie. So I said, all right. I said, I'll come back, you know. And I actually did run for next term. I guess I didn't market myself as much as I did before. And funny enough, when I won as president, I'm told I won by one vote. And when I lost the second term, I lost by one vote, you know. So it was one of those, they kind of loved me. I don't know. It was,
it could have been the same person, right?
It almost, yeah. The first president, Jacob Lapid was the one that was running against me the first time around. And then the second time around, it was Dave McLeod from Australia.
Okay. No, I was talking about the vote. It could have been the same person that voted for and then
absolutely.
against.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very possible. I think, well, one of the things that was that I want to say to my detriment, my wife was extremely pleased that I was not going to be running this show for another year, but I didn't get a single vote from Latin America. They didn't vote. And it's not that they didn't want to vote for me. It was that there's a certain disconnect from this region. They see the associations, they're a part of the associations, but I think the language in a lot of cases, it's a little bit too much for them. So they're not really aware of what's going on, even though they're getting the emails. And so that's kind of why when I did become president, I wanted to make sure the regional directors were a little bit more involved with their area, because there is a cultural disconnect, there's a language barrier sometimes, and it's really important to make sure that the messages that are coming down from the top are actually reaching everybody. So yeah, that was, interestingly enough, I lost because Latin America didn't vote.
But you know what, you got a good point in there, because you're right, different cultural groups view associations in a different light. Like you just said there, you know, the Latin American groups didn't vote. Maybe there was a lack of misunderstanding, or just this isn't for us to get involved in, you know. So, and then you've got the forward thinking, you know, Europe, America, the guys that are, you know, there pushing things forward. So, you know, you're right, it's a mixed group, and that's the beauty of having these global associations. You meet all types from all around the world that have got different opinions and just views on how the industry's evolving. Which brings me on to my next point, Mr. Mikkelson, is how your insights and trends. So from where you started in running human sources, then going into the private sector. You've seen changes in this
Oh,
industry, right, over the last
yeah.
few decades. How are you seeing things moving forward now? Because what are the challenges for investigators operating locally and globally now, and how do you see that change?
Yeah. So 30 years back in the day, everything was gumshoe. It really was. Especially in Panama, there's no databases for anything. If you jump ahead to today, there's a database for everything, but you may not be able to have easy access to it. But everything is in a computer somewhere, and so there's that aspect of it of gaining access to these databases, and it is still open source, but sometimes you have to go down to, like, for example, down here there's a land registry. There's the public registry, which is corporations, properties, and things like this. But there's another land registry, which they're updating, and you can go down to this office, and this is something that I don't think anybody really knows. Most Panamanians don't know about this, right? And you can go down to the land authority and knock on their door and say, "I'd like to put in this request." It's a long process, and they're just, to this day, they're still trying to update their database. So there's so many different things you can look at, and different divisions or entities that you can research with. The other thing is the evolution of types of criminality. I think, for example, intellectual property wasn't a term 30 years ago. I mean, it was probably understood, but a fake Nike product, big deal. It's the way it is, and really it was the company who needed to attack the aggressor in that sense, and there's really no assistance from government. So then you got intellectual property comes up, and there's laws and whatnot, and they're making it to a criminal element, and then you see other things like compliance. Compliance is just a law that says this is how we want everybody to act. Okay, and you need to know who your customers are, and you need to know who your providers are. You need to know who everybody is before you even do business with them. Back in the day, that wasn't an issue. So, and I'm not saying that as a businessman. I'm saying that as an investigator. Now we have so many different avenues that we can latch onto, and we can do investigations for. There's so much more to the industry. And so as time has gone by, that's been the way that is. You look at money laundering. Money laundering came as a way to stop drug trafficking. Okay, it's right. And then it was to stop illegal trafficking of weapons, and then human trafficking got involved, and then it was just any illegality that came from those funds. I mean, so it's just it's such a world, right? Of course, then everybody went out and got their CAMS certification, and then everybody got, and so, but you have to get on top of that, right? So you have to see the change, you have to embrace that change, especially if it's coming from the government, and you need to get certified, and you need to understand it. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence, and that's such a world. Been going to a lot of these trade shows, and if it doesn't say AI in their product, they're garbage. It's only been a couple of years, right? And crypto is going to be, it is, and it's going to be so much bigger. And you still have the deniers. You have people saying, "Oh, I'm not going to get into crypto because I don't understand it." You need to start understanding it, and really, it's going to be huge. It might, and definitely when it comes to artificial intelligence, that's going to take over, and not take over the world like robots, destroying the human race type of taking over necessarily, or maybe, but but at least it's going to be taking over the way we do business and the way we think. We have a polygraph office, and you do a little bit of critical thinking. You go, I'll bet you AI is going to just destroy the polygraph business. Polygraph is still semi-analog, meaning not they don't use the big boxes, they're computerized. They've been doing that now for quite some time, but they haven't really evolved much from the last 30 years. And AI has evolved so much in just the last year that it's crazy. You may not even be real. I might be talking to
I'm not there yet, but no, you're right. You're right. It's
yeah.
scary.
So
Tell me, Brett, what makes a strong leader?
what makes a strong leader? First of all, the definition of leader is you have somebody that follows you. And if you have somebody that follows you, you've got a responsibility. You need to understand what that responsibility is. And it's to them. It's not them to you. And so as long as you focus on the them that they are, in whatever way that means, then that makes you, I think, a strong leader. And that's very basic, but there's so many different examples. It's being aware of what's going on with them, not just with business. What's going on with them in their lives. If there's something going on in their lives that is so massive that they're not going to be able to focus on your business. So I mean, there's a win-win. As long as you're truly taking care of your people or those who are following you, right? Because it doesn't have to be your employees. It could be other people in the industry. You could have people looking up to you. And the moment that you do something that's unethical or what, like I said earlier, I like what this guy is. I like what this guy's doing. That's what brought me up. And if I start doing exactly the things that I say that I shouldn't do or that nobody should be doing, and that hits the news, and it's going to bring a certain group of your inadvertent followers down. And I think that would be my way of defining that.
And what do you look for in an investigator when you're looking to contract some work out or look at additional resources or employ a new employee? What qualities do you look for an investigator?
Boy, I tell you, reliability is a big one. A lot of people like to look for people with a lot of experience. And for me, a lot of times that experience really could have damaged them in what I need them to do. We've had, I mentioned this earlier about I think maybe in the prior to recording, but I don't, in no way am I belittling anybody in their present capacity. But I've come to realize that not everybody that was former military is the right match, and I'll give you an example as to why. I had an opportunity to hire the former head of CID. CID is pretty much the investigative branch of the U.S. Army. Hired him on to take over as our director for a spell, and I went off on this. It was a huge case. To me, it was huge. We were looking for a missing child, and he was somewhere in Central America, and we were hot on the trail of the person who had him. And I was literally on the ground 100% nonstop looking for this person. And this was in a time where we didn't have cell phones, so this is a long time ago. But I hired this guy on, and when I came back, we're talking about a person that manages 150, 200, 300 cases, at a time. And we were managing maybe 20 or 30. It wasn't that big of a deal. I came back, he had done nothing. And he goes, says, no, he says, I had to take care of some paperwork. And then I got sick. And then and I realized this, I said, he isn't on, there's no sense of urgency. Because in the military or whatnot, maybe when they get a case, they can solve it now or they can solve it in 2 years. It doesn't matter. That person that they get the evidence on is going to be turning big rocks into little rocks back in, in jail. Yeah. Later on, it doesn't matter when, and that's not what our industry is about. There's a sense of urgency. So there's a couple of things, great sense of curiosity. I love it when somebody comes in and I'm interviewing them and they've asked me more questions than I've been asking them. If I'm overwhelmed with questions, boy, I tell you what, I'll close out anything else I have going on and I will let that person ask. And if it goes in the right direction, they're probably going to get hired.
Yeah, fantastic. Good quality. It's good qualities to have, and and also, to be honest with you, rare as well
Yeah.
now. Um, I want to finish off with big milestone events coming up in the industry. So we've got CII hitting 70 years
Yep.
this year. We've got WAD hitting
Yeah.
100. How important is the continuity of association milestones for private sector investigators around the world, and how important is it for us to get together regularly?
Oh, I mean, it's especially, wow, it's a way to close, but there's a lot of those questions are broader than than the other ones. Um, it is so important to get together, even if you're seeing the same faces. There's an important element of human connection that you can never get through a virtual meeting. The everything that's coming up new in our industry, to be refreshed with, even if it's something I've already done that OSINT training stuff, and you'd be surprised what's new in OSINT. And as long as you have a trainer that is up to date, they're going to bring you something brand new that you've never seen before. I swear it. You've never ever seen it, and that's the way that is every time. If there's an OSINT training event, I need to be a part of that, right? Then there's the milestone aspect of these associations. If you have an association that's been around for 100 years, 70 years, it's probably a legitimate association. We have so many other associations that are popping up, and nothing on them, because there are new things that are happening. And so there's going to be a new type of an association, like ACAMS. I mentioned that earlier. You want to get your anti-money laundering certification. You got to do it through an association that, exemplifies exactly that. So you want to get into a newer association. There's going to be a crypto association that's going to pop up here pretty soon, and they're not going to be able to say, well, we've been around for 100 years. It's just not going to happen. So,
Yeah.
but those milestones are going to be important. There's several other associations very similar to that, and their trajectory, the type of people that are involved, and as leaders themselves, being president or a part of the board, they're going to care about the people that are following them, and you can latch on to that. So.
Brett Mikkelson, I've got it right this time.
It.
It's been a pleasure speaking. You see, I do listen. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and your journey with us today on Leaders. You are a true industry leader. Thank you. Brett's details are coming up on the screen now.